Inside New York State Prison, survival in America's largest system. The scale no one sees. More than 30,000 incarcerated individuals. Dozens of facilities. Thousands of correction officers. Spread across rural towns, former military bases, and aging concrete compounds, this is the New York State Prison System, one of the largest state-run correctional systems in the United States. Unlike federal prisons operated by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, New York's facilities are managed by the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, commonly known as DOCCS. For decades, this system has housed people convicted of everything from drug offenses to homicide. At its peak in 1999, New York held more than 72,000 incarcerated people in state prisons. Today, that number has dropped significantly due to sentencing reforms and declining crime rates, but the scale remains enormous. Behind the statistics are institutions like Attica, Sing Sing, Clinton, Auburn, names that carry history, controversy, and in some cases, tragedy. This is not a story about a single prison. This is about survival inside an entire system. And to understand it, we start with how it was built.
Before we dive into today's powerful story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping tales. Your support helps us keep sharing these stories, and we wouldn't want you to miss any of the action. Now, let's get started.
How New York built a prison empire. New York's prison system is one of the oldest in America. In 1817, construction began on what would become the Auburn Correctional Facility. It introduced what became known as the Auburn system, a strict model of enforced silence, group labor by day, solitary confinement by night. Just a few years later, in 1826, the Sing Sing Correctional Facility opened along the Hudson River. It would become one of the most recognized prison names in the world. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, New York expanded its prison network. But the largest growth came in the late 20th century. Between the 1970s and 1990s, tough on-crime policies, especially the Rockefeller drug laws enacted in 1973 under Governor Nelson Rockefeller, dramatically increased incarceration rates. Mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses filled state facilities. To accommodate the rising population, New York built prisons across upstate counties. Many rural towns became economically dependent on correctional facilities as major employers. By the late 1990s, New York operated more than 70 state prisons. But mass incarceration came with consequences: overcrowding, violence, lawsuits, and growing public scrutiny. And one event in particular forced the world to look inside. Attica, the moment everything changed. September 1971. Inside Attica Correctional Facility in western New York, tensions had been building for months. Incarcerated men demanded better living conditions, improved medical care, and basic human rights. Overcrowding and racial inequality were persistent complaints. On September 9, 1971, inmates took control of parts of the prison, holding correction officers and civilian staff hostage. For 4 days, negotiations unfolded between inmates, state officials, and observers, including civil rights attorney William Kunstler. Then, on September 13, state police and National Guard troops stormed the facility. By the end, 43 people were dead, including 33 incarcerated men and 10 hostages. Official investigations later confirmed that all 10 hostages died from gunfire by law enforcement, not by inmates, correcting earlier public claims made by state officials. The Attica Uprising became one of the deadliest prison rebellions in U.S. history. It reshaped public debate about prison conditions, state power, and inmate rights. Lawsuits continued for decades, culminating in a $12 million settlement in 2000 for surviving inmates and families. Attica remains operational today. But its name still echoes as a reminder: what happens inside prisons does not always stay there. Life inside a modern New York prison. Today, New York operates a mix of maximum, medium, and minimum security facilities. A maximum security prison like Attica or Clinton houses individuals serving long sentences, including life terms. Movement is tightly controlled. Cells are typically small, often around 6 by 9 feet, with metal bunks, a sink, and a toilet. A typical day follows a strict schedule: early morning count, breakfast in mess hall, assigned work details or programs, yard time, evening count, lock-in. Incarcerated individuals may work in kitchens, maintenance, industrial programs, or prison industries. Some participate in educational or vocational programs. New York also operates college programs in partnership with institutions under initiatives like the Barred Prison Initiative. But daily life depends heavily on classification level, behavior record, and facility rules. And beyond the official schedule, survival often depends on something else entirely: navigating the social structure inside. Classification: who goes where? When someone enters New York State custody, they do not simply choose a facility. They undergo a classification process that evaluates criminal history, sentence length, behavior record, prior escape history, medical and mental health needs. This determines whether they are assigned to maximum, medium, or minimum security. According to DOCCS guidelines, individuals with violent felony convictions or long sentences are more likely to be placed in higher security facilities. Transfers can occur over time based on behavior, disciplinary record, and programming participation. But classification also determines something critical: exposure. Higher security prisons often have stricter movement restrictions and more intensive supervision. Lower security facilities may allow dorm-style housing and more programming. Yet no matter the level, the rules are clear. And breaking them can send someone somewhere far more restrictive. To a place many inside call the box. We'll go there next. The box, solitary confinement. Inside New York prisons, disciplinary segregation is formally known as the Special Housing Unit, SHU. Among incarcerated individuals, it is often called the box. In SHU, individuals are typically confined to their cells for up to 23 hours a day. Meals are delivered through a slot in the door. Recreation, when permitted, may take place alone in a small fenced enclosure. For decades, SHU sentences could extend for months or even years for certain disciplinary infractions. Advocacy groups, including the New York Civil Liberties Union, argued that prolonged isolation caused severe psychological harm. In 2021, New York passed the HALT Solitary Confinement Act. The law limits segregated confinement to 15 consecutive days and prohibits its use for vulnerable populations, including individuals under 21, over 55, pregnant individuals, and those with disabilities. The law was widely reported as one of the most restrictive solitary confinement reforms in the country. However, implementation has been debated, with correction officer unions arguing it compromises safety, while reform advocates claim enforcement remains inconsistent. Official data show that the use of solitary confinement has declined significantly since the law's passage, but oversight reports indicate ongoing disputes over how isolation units are classified. Inside, time in SHU can reshape a person's daily rhythm: meals alone, silence broken only by distant voices, and constant monitoring. For some, it is temporary. For others, it defines years of incarceration. Correction officers, power and pressure. New York's prison system employs thousands of correction officers. They are represented by the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association, commonly known as NYSCAPA. Correction officers are responsible for maintaining order, conducting counts, overseeing movement, responding to emergencies, and enforcing rules. In maximum security facilities, staffing levels are higher, and procedures are more rigid. But the job has long been described as physically and psychologically demanding. Following prison population declines, New York has closed more than 20 correctional facilities since 2011. That reduction has affected staffing patterns and local economies, particularly in upstate towns dependent on prison employment. Tensions between officers and incarcerated individuals have periodically surfaced in reports of excessive force or unsafe conditions. The U.S. Department of Justice has investigated specific facilities in the past, including Rikers Island, which, notably, is operated by New York City and not part of the state prison system. State prisons have also faced scrutiny in cases alleging staff misconduct. Some lawsuits have resulted in settlements, others remain contested. Correction officers argue that understaffing and policy changes have made facilities more dangerous. Reform groups argue that greater oversight is needed to prevent abuse. Inside a prison, authority is constant. But it is also complicated. Gangs and social structure. While New York prisons do not publicly release detailed gang intelligence reports, court documents and law enforcement testimony confirm that organized groups operate within certain facilities. Groups often align along neighborhood, racial, or ideological lines. Some have ties to street gangs in New York City or upstate communities. According to reporting from outlets such as the New York Times and court records, gang affiliation can influence housing assignments, yard interactions, and conflicts. However, not all incarcerated individuals are gang affiliated. Many actively avoid group involvement, focusing instead on programming or personal networks. DOCS monitors security threat groups, its formal term for organized prison gangs. Individuals identified as STG members may face additional scrutiny or separation measures. Violence rates in New York prisons have fluctuated over time. DOCS publishes data on inmate assaults and assaults on staff annually. While incidents do occur, New York's overall prison violence rates are lower than some other large states, according to Bureau of Justice Statistics comparisons. Still, in a confined environment, even isolated incidents can escalate quickly. Survival often depends on reading the room, understanding alliances, avoiding debts, respecting space. Because inside, small misunderstandings can carry serious consequences. Work, wages, and prison industries. Most incarcerated individuals in New York State prisons are assigned work details. These jobs may include kitchen duty, laundry services, facility maintenance, groundskeeping, industrial production through a program known as Corcraft, operated by DOCCS. Incarcerated workers produce office furniture, clothing, and other goods used by state agencies. According to DOCCS data, wages typically range from cents per hour to slightly over $1 per hour, depending on job assignment and seniority. Supporters argue that work programs provide job skills and structure. Critics argue that wages are extremely low compared to outside labor markets. Participation in work assignments is often required unless medically exempt. Refusal can result in disciplinary action. Some incarcerated individuals use earnings to purchase commissary items, food, hygiene products, writing materials, or to send limited funds home. Money inside prison is not just currency. It can influence social standing, access to comfort, and sometimes vulnerability. Education behind bars. Despite its size and security focus, New York operates one of the country's most expansive prison education systems. In 1994, the federal government eliminated Pell Grant eligibility for incarcerated individuals. College programs declined nationwide. But in 2015, New York launched the College in Prison Reentry initiative, restoring access to higher education through state funding. In 2020, federal Pell eligibility was reinstated nationally. Programs like the Barred Prison Initiative offer accredited degrees inside certain facilities. Studies published by the RAND Corporation indicate that incarcerated individuals who participate in educational programs are significantly less likely to return to prison after release. Participation depends on facility assignment, eligibility, and available space. Not all prisons host college programs. Still, classrooms operate behind walls that once symbolized only punishment. For some, education becomes a path to transformation. For others, access remains limited. And even with degrees, re-entry into society presents its own barriers. That's where we're headed next. Medical and mental health care. Every state prison system is legally required to provide medical care to incarcerated individuals under the U. South Supreme Court ruling in Estelle v. Gamble, 1976, which established that deliberate indifference to serious medical needs violates the Eighth Amendment. In New York State prisons, health services are overseen through DOCCS in coordination with contracted medical providers. Routine services include primary medical care, chronic disease management, dental services, mental health treatment, medication distribution. According to DOCCS annual reports, a significant percentage of incarcerated individuals have diagnosed mental health conditions. Nationally, Bureau of Justice Statistics surveys show high rates of mental illness among prison populations. New York operates specialized mental health units within certain facilities. However, advocacy groups, including the Correctional Association of New York, have documented concerns about staffing shortages, access delays, and treatment conditions. Litigation in federal court has also addressed mental health treatment in specific facilities over the years. Some cases resulted in mandated reforms or settlements, others remain disputed. Medical care in prison is delivered within security constraints, locked movement, escort procedures, and limited privacy. For individuals with serious illness, access to timely care can determine quality of life, and sometimes survival. Women in New York State prisons. While men make up the majority of the prison population, New York operates dedicated facilities for women, including the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility and the Taconic Correctional Facility. Bedford Hills is the state's only maximum security prison for women. Women in New York prisons are statistically more likely to have histories of trauma, according to national data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Many are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses. New York has implemented programs focused on parenting support, trauma-informed care, and educational services tailored to women. Bedford Hills operates a nursery program allowing eligible incarcerated mothers to live with their infants for a limited period after birth. The program has existed since 1901, making it one of the oldest prison nursery programs in the United States. However, advocacy organizations have raised concerns about healthcare access and the emotional toll of separation from children when eligibility requirements are not met. Women's incarceration in New York has declined significantly over the past 2 decades, mirroring overall prison population trends. Yet the challenges faced inside remain complex, often shaped by family separation, economic hardship, and limited access to community resources after release. youthful offenders and raise the age. For years, 16 and 17-year-olds charged as adults in New York could be placed in adult correctional facilities. That changed in 2017. New York passed the Raise the Age law, gradually increasing the age of criminal responsibility to 18 for most offenses. Under the law, most 16 and 17-year-olds charged with nonviolent felonies are processed in family court rather than adult criminal court. Those accused of serious violent felonies may still be prosecuted in adult court but are typically housed in specialized youth units rather than general population. New York developed separate housing areas designed to reduce contact between younger individuals and older incarcerated adults. Supporters argued the reform aligned New York with national standards. Critics expressed concerns about implementation logistics and public safety. According to state data, the number of minors held in adult prisons has decreased significantly since the law's full implementation in 2019. Youth incarceration remains controversial nationwide, but New York's policy shift marked a significant change in how the state approaches adolescent offenders. Parole, a second chance? In New York, individuals serving indeterminate sentences may become eligible for parole after serving a minimum term. Parole decisions are made by the New York State Board of Parole, part of DOCCS. Board members review case files, conduct interviews, and consider factors including criminal history, institutional behavior, program participation, victim impact statements, risk assessments. Historically, parole grant rates fluctuated significantly. Advocacy groups argued that, for years, parole boards disproportionately denied release to individuals convicted of violent offenses, even after decades of incarceration. In recent years, public reporting from outlets like the New York Times has documented increased parole approvals under shifting board leadership and revised guidelines emphasizing rehabilitation. Still, parole remains discretionary. Two individuals with similar records may receive different outcomes depending on board evaluation. For incarcerated people serving long sentences, parole hearings can represent hope or repeated disappointment. Because in New York State prisons, time served does not always mean time finished. Release and reentry. Release from a New York State prison does not mean the end of supervision. Many individuals leave under parole supervision, required to report to parole officers, follow curfews, and comply with employment and housing requirements. According to DOCCS data, reentry services include transitional housing referrals, employment readiness programs, substance abuse counseling, community supervision. Recidivism rates have declined in New York over the past 2 decades. DOC's reports show that a majority of individuals released do not return to prison within 3 years, though rates vary depending on offense type and age. Reentry challenges include securing housing with a criminal record, finding employment, reconnecting with family, managing stigma. Organizations across New York, including nonprofit reentry groups, work alongside parole officers to reduce barriers. But for many, the first days after release are uncertain. A bus ticket, a small amount of money, a list of rules, and the weight of everything left behind inside. A system in transition. Over the past 2 decades, New York's prison system has undergone significant change. At its peak in 1999, the state incarcerated more than 72,000 people in its prisons. As of recent DOCCS reports, that number has fallen by more than half. Since 2011, New York has closed more than 20 correctional facilities due to declining prison populations. Lawmakers cited reduced crime rates, sentencing reforms, and budget considerations as primary factors. Major policy changes have shaped this transition. Reform of the Rockefeller drug laws beginning in 2000 for the 2017 Raise the Age legislation. The 2021 HALT Solitary Confinement Act expanded access to college education programs, increased parole approvals under revised board guidance, yet challenges remain. Correction officer unions argue that staffing shortages and policy changes have increased tension and safety risks. Advocacy groups argue that oversight and accountability must continue to improve conditions. Reports of violence, medical care concerns, and implementation disputes over reform laws continue to surface in state oversight reviews and media investigations. New York's prison system today is smaller than it was in the 1990s, but it is still one of the largest in the United States. It is a system balancing punishment, public safety, reform, and rehabilitation, often under public scrutiny. And inside its walls, daily life continues. Counts are conducted. Meals are served. Classes are held. Parole hearings take place. For the incarcerated, survival means navigating rules, relationships, and time. For the state, survival means navigating law, budget, and public expectation. The story of New York State prisons is not static. It is evolving. Its history includes innovation and controversy, reform and resistance, tragedy and transformation. From Auburn's silent system to Attica's uprising. From mass incarceration to modern sentencing reform. From solitary confinement debates to expanded college classrooms. What happens inside these facilities affects not only those incarcerated, but families, communities, correction officers, lawmakers, and the broader public. Because prisons are not separate from society. They are part of it. And as policies continue to change, the future of New York's prison system will likely depend on how the state balances accountability, safety, and rehabilitation in the years ahead. If you found this deep dive informative, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more fully factual crime and prison documentaries. On this channel, we focus on verified reporting, no exaggeration, no speculation, just documented reality. Let us know in the comments which state prison system you'd like us to examine next. And as always, thanks for watching.